Hey everyone, I'm Jennifer Whitaker, trauma specialist, and welcome back. This is the third video in a series of several videos I'm doing about the BITE model of authoritarian control. And today I'm going to talk about the I in the BITE model, which is information control. And you'll notice that I'm going to do a very similar introduction to all four of the videos when I talk about the B, the I, the T, and the E. So if you want to skip the introduction, just skip forward a couple minutes where you can get into the heart of the video. So the BITE model of authoritarian control was developed by Dr. Steve Hassan to describe the specific methods and tactics that authoritarian groups, leaders, and individuals use to recruit and maintain control over other people. And I'm going to stick with the example of the puppeteer and the marionette, because a puppeteer controls a marionette using a cross brace that has strings and the marionettes attached to the strings. And it doesn't take a big movement of that cross brace and it doesn't take a big manipulation of the strings to get a very specific behavior out of the marionette. It's the small movements, the subtle movements that are really hard to spot with the naked eye. And that's the magic behind the marionette show and the amazement at the lifelike interactions that we see that can result from these minute, subtle, nuanced movements of the cross brace and strings. Well, keep that in mind as you watch these series of videos, because the tactics that I'm outlining for you, and I shouldn't say it that way, the tactics that I'm sharing with you that Dr. Steve Hassan has outlined for all of us, help us deconstruct those little subtle movements that are used to control us and others by people who want to be the puppeteers. And these are not easy to spot, because if they were, none of us would ever end up in controlling situations. And that's just not the case. I think as we go through these videos, we're probably going to see that all of us have had some sort of interaction, some deeper than others. And the BITE model can be really helpful. And if you want to be most effective in applying the BITE model, think of only one relationship or one situation at a time as you go through this list. And if you wish to follow along with me, please go to freedomofmind.com, which is Dr. Steve Hassan's website. And in the drop-down menu under Education, choose Steve Hassan's BITE model of authoritarian control, and you'll pull up the exact same list that I'm looking at. So today, we're going to talk about information control. But before I jump in, hi everyone, I'm Jennifer Whitaker, and welcome back to my channel. Please give me a thumbs up if you're finding this information helpful. Share, subscribe, and don't forget to hit that bell so you don't miss any videos, especially in this series, because in my humble opinion, this information is so valuable for everyone to have. So let's jump in today and talk about information control. So if you remember, the BITE model stands for behavior control, information control, thought control, and emotional control. If you missed my video on behavior control, that came out last week, you can circle back and watch it. Today is information control. And under information control, there are several different categories, 6. And under each of the 6 main categories, there are different subcategories. So information control includes deception, deliberately withholding information, distorting information to make it more palatable and more acceptable to the victim, or systematically lying to the cult member, just outright blatant falsehoods. So these are tactics that are used under the category of deception. And deception is often used across the board to recruit and get members or victims sucked into controlling relationships. And the deception is the charm and the charisma or the fast friendship, the love bombing. It all falls under the category of love bombing, where you think you're joining a good thing. You think you met your soulmate or your twin flame, or you've met somebody that you were a sister with in a past life because you're just immediately best friends. And you'll find that the love bombing starts to whittle away and fall off whenever you're sucked into the situation. So look at your relationships and look at situations you were in. Were you deceptively recruited into that situation? When you applied for the job, what happened after you were hired? Was it the same as what you were told was going to happen before you were hired? The person you're dating, were they honest up front, or are they a Jekyll and Hyde personality? You dated Jekyll and now you're in a relationship or married to Hyde. And cults are notorious for this, telling you that you're getting into one thing and you're actually stepping into another. And this is a category that kind of makes MLMs a little bit skeevy, because MLMs will lead you to believe that you're stepping into a situation where, oh, it's about the products and we have this good thing. But what it's really about is recruitment. And if you're not constantly recruiting and putting people in your downline, you're not going to be successful. So it's not truly about the products. It's about recruiting a really big downline. So again, deception is a huge one. Number 2 on the list is minimizing or discouraging access to non-cult sources of information or non-authoritarian sources of information. So maybe your partner is controlling your information, the information that you have access to. Maybe a family member, because it doesn't have to be a cultic group or a cultic situation. However, we do know in cults that there is often limits into what you can look at on the internet, what TV shows you can watch, what radio stations you can listen to, what books you can read, what articles, newspapers, magazines, and media outlets that you can have access to. And this is a big one in a modern day type of cult, which is a political cult. Political cults and hate and extremist or terrorist cults are really good at limiting the media. Are you being limited from accessing critical information? Let's say you are in a group and a lot of people have left and there are a lot of former members. What are you allowed to have relationships with them? Are you allowed to talk to them? Are you allowed to be friends with them? Because a lot of times if it's an unhealthy or destructive group, they're not going to want you to contact and they're any former members, and they're going to implant all kinds of scary beliefs. Scientology does this by calling ex-Scientologists suppressive people. Another subcategory of minimizing or discouraging access to non-cult sources of information is keeping members so busy that they don't have time to think and investigate. So if they can keep you wrapped up in busy work, you don't have any free time whatsoever to go out and look for other sources of information. You're just constantly doing what you're told. And the last subcategory under this one is controlling the individual through their cell phone usage, which could be texting, calls, internet tracking, GPS tracking. You know, like I pinged your phone, you know, like I saw the tracking on your phone. I know exactly where you were. So this is another big one. If someone is going through your phone and double checking at the end of the day, who did you contact? Who did you call? Why did you get this text? Why, as if I can explain why somebody texted a wrong number and happened to get me. So if you find yourself in any of these situations, again, these are red flags about information control. Now, number 3 on the list of information control is compartmentalizing information into outsider versus insider doctrines. And there are 3 subcategories under this one. And so this is an important one. Well, what they say is not true. What happens inside the relationship or inside the group or inside the authoritarian family is the only thing that we can trust. We can't trust any outsiders. And so it's a way to ensure that information is not freely accessible by implanting these fear tactics and scary beliefs that if you access information from the outsider, then something bad's going to happen. Or, you know, if it's a religious cult, they demonize it, or they might say that that's satanic or demonic. Another subcategory here is controlling information at different levels and missions within the group. Now, we see this in the Scientology cult, where at level 1, you only have access to certain information. And when you level up, you have access to more information. And then you level up again, and then you go up through, I was never a Scientologist. I think they call them the OT levels, until you can get to the certain level where the big secret is revealed that's supposed to change your life. So trying to work your way up to access information is a tactic used, and only allowing leadership to decide who needs to know what and when. So somebody else is dictating whether or not you have access to information because they think you don't need to know. Again, that's a little bit skeevy and scary too, especially if it's an individual relationship, or, if it's a cult where you're being controlled. If it's a situation where you're being controlled, that can be scary. So again, look at how many boxes do I check off in all of the categories. If it's only one box in all 4 categories, it might just be like, oh, okay, I have this one thing. Maybe that's a quirk in the person, versus I have 4 boxes checked under B, I have 5 under I have 6 under T, and I have 4 more under E. That you're probably in a controlling situation. Okay, number 4 under information control is encouraging spying on other members. And we know that this happens a lot. It can happen in families where a parent is encouraging one sibling to keep tabs on the other and then report back to the parents. Within the Nexium cult, we heard this on when in their program called DOS, where you had to give some sort of collateral, you had to give information, you had to say things that could be used against you almost as blackmail later on. So again, it's spying on other people, imposing a buddy system to monitor and control the member. You can't go anywhere unless there's another cult member or another group member with you. You have to be accompanied everywhere you go. Again, like I said, reporting the deviant thoughts, feelings, and actions to leadership, because this will be held against you next time. Scientology has this confession, and where you have to go in and like hold the little cans. I forget what that's called. Auditing. They call it auditing. And then another one is ensuring that the individual behavior is monitored by the group. So, again, in some of these groups, it's all like all eyes are on you, and you're also watching other people. What can I see other people doing wrong? Because if I report it, I might gain favor because I reported something, but it's also going to come back to bite that person in the butt. And that person, if they're reporting me, might not fully have understood what they were seeing. And likewise, when I saw that other person doing something, maybe I didn't fully understand what was happening, but I reported it anyway, and the person got in trouble for something that wasn't really true. Number 5, under information control, is extensive use of cult-generated information and propaganda that includes newsletters, magazines, journals, audio tapes, videotapes, YouTube, movies, and other media, and also misquoting statements or using them out of context from non-cult sources. So it's the Jehovah's Witnesses have the Watchtower magazine. And so the Watchtower is their publication. And, if it's printed in the Watchtower, that's golden. But if it comes from anywhere else, you can't trust it. So, again, some of these cults that require you to take classes in class after class after class. If you want to maintain your membership within this cult, you have to keep taking classes that we generate. So that can be a little bit of a culty situation, because number 1, they're fleecing you for your money, your hard-earned money, and also the information that you have access to is re-indoctrinating you every time you take a class into their doctrine. And then misquoting statements or using them out of context from non-cult sources is a way to minimize and invalidate anybody who might say, whoa, this isn't healthy. Are you sure that that's okay? Anyone who wants to kind of put the brakes on and try to talk reason. And then the last one, number 6 under information control, is the unethical use of confession. And so I think I kind of alluded to this earlier. Information about sins or transgressions that are used to disrupt and dissolve identity boundaries. So if they can get you into, gosh, I have to report everything I did wrong today at the end of the day, there's this dissolution of boundaries to where you're just going to spill it all the time. And then down the road, that's going to be held against you. And there may even be with a withholding of forgiveness or a withholding of absolution if you don't do A, B, C, and X, Y, and Z. You have to, jump through the hoops and make your way through the gauntlet before you'll be forgiven. Again, another method of control and power over dynamics. And then the last subcategory under the number 6 here is manipulation of memory and possibly implanting false memories. And this is one where certain cults, and even in individual like narcissistic relationships, like if you're in an abusive relationship, there could be this subtle manipulation where, when you went into the relationship, you thought, wow, I love my family. I come from a really great family. But over and over, you hear these little digs about how your family's not okay, or what's wrong with your family, or how evil your family is, or how terrible that thing is. And then you start to question, gosh, maybe my family's not as nice as I thought it was. Or so it can start to whittle away at some of those pleasant memories that you might have and start to turn them into something darker and uglier. Now, again, that is just one example. It can happen in large groups, and in groups where there's excommunication. This can be a big one, is if I leave the group, I'm going to lose contact with my family. And that creates a psychological scenario that can mess with your memory. So that pretty much wraps up information control. And again, this is just a scratching the surface introduction. If you have any questions or comments about, the B or the I and BITE model, please comment below, like, share, subscribe, and be sure to hit the bell so you don't miss next week's video on thought control. All right, everyone, I'll see you next time. Happy self-discovery.